Sex offender registration. Here's some things you may not know about sex offender registration in Texas. The term conjures up a vision of a creepy old man who may be living in your neighborhood that you need to check out by looking at the Texas Sex Offender Registry, an online resource for citizens of the state. What you may not know about the Sex Offender Registry in Texas is it encompasses a whole host of sexual offenses. Offenses not just involving kids or child predators, but adult sexual assaults, individuals who have not even been convicted of the offenses they were charged with. So let's break that down a little bit and talk about some things you may not know about sex offender registration in Texas. First of all, there are a number of offenses for which you may have to register as a sex offender in Texas. They're all sexual in nature, but they're certainly of a varying degree. Offenses that require registration in Texas involve sexual assault, child sexual assault, sexual performance by a child, indecency by contact or by exposure, aggravated sexual assault, continuous sexual assault of a child, online solicitation of a minor, certain restraint offenses that are committed for sexual purposes, compelling prostitution, indecent exposure if you're a repeat offender, possession of child pornography or any child pornography related offense, and the attempt, conspiracy, or solicitation of any of these offenses. In Texas, you have to register as a sex offender if you accept any plea to one of these offenses. Any plea meaning whether you get deferred, probation, or you're sent to prison, you must register as a sex offender. Deferred is typically not considered a conviction in Texas, but for purposes of the sex offender registry, you must register even if you plead to deferred. That means even if you're not convicted of the offense. And remember, some of these offenses have potentially nothing to do with an actual victim, much less an actual child victim. For instance, online solicitation of a minor is a conversation that can occur with someone who is undercover who purports to be underage. So you could have an instance where a person engaged in an online conversation, never went out to meet someone, perhaps never intended to meet someone, and yet they are going to be on the sex offender registry even if they accept deferred and even if they are not convicted because they took deferred as opposed to prison time or straight probation. Also notice that attempted offenses also require registration on the sex offender database. So what that means is you could have an attempted online solicitation of a minor. And even that offense, if you plead to it, even to deferred, you're going to register in Texas as a sex offender. There are two lengths of possible registration in Texas. One is for a 10-year term and the other is for a lifetime term. The 10-year term is an easy way to describe what the statute requires, but it does not truly depict a 10-year registration period in most cases. There's a reason for that. If you're placed on probation or on deferred, you're going to have to register as a sex offender as a condition of probation. And in Texas, probation on a felony case without any extensions can be 10 years long. So for a period of 10 years, you're required to report as a condition of your probation or deferred. Once that sentence is complete, you then begin registering for the state as a sex offender. So what sounds like 10 years may actually be a 20-year period. Similarly, if you're sent to prison, well, the time that you're in prison is not time that you're registering as a sex offender. So whether that's 2 or 4 years, whenever your sentence is complete, that's when the clock starts ticking for registration, and you will register for 10 more years after your sentence is complete. Lifetime registration is exactly what it sounds like. You are going to be registering for the rest of your life. Deregistration is possible under some narrow circumstances. Two of the threshold questions for whether or not a person is qualified to deregister are: first, does the person have only one count of conviction that resulted in the sex offender registration requirement? In other words, if you pled to more than one count or more than one charge, and more than one charge requires registration as a sex offender, you will not be able to deregister at any point. Second, the length of registration required by the federal government for your charge must be lower than the state's requirement for your charge. So we're only talking about individuals who have to register for a lifetime, and you have to look at the federal statute to see if under the equivalent federal provision is the registration requirement less than the lifetime requirement you've been given by the state of Texas. If those two conditions exist, you may be eligible to deregister. It is still a long, grueling, and expensive process to get deregistered in the state of Texas. What does a person who is placed on the sex offender registry have to report? Within a week of being given the condition, a person who is required to be on the sex offender registry must provide to local law enforcement their name, date of birth, descriptors like height, weight, the color of their eyes, and where they'll be staying. This information will have to be verified. In other words, the address will need to be accompanied by some proof that you're receiving mail or paying utilities at that address. If you're on the sex offender registry in Texas, you will have to report your whereabouts at least annually to your local law enforcement agency. Some offenses will result in greater reporting requirements. You will have a risk level based on the nature of the alleged charge and the potential danger that you present to the community. The levels are 1 or low, 2, which is a moderate category, and 3 for high. Your reporting requirements can be more frequent the higher your risk level is determined to be. You have to notify local law enforcement anytime your address changes or if you have a change of job. For most Texans, your driver's license is good for 6 years. If you're on the sex offender registry, your driver's license must be renewed annually. There will be restrictions on where you can go and where you can live. You cannot go within 500 feet of a child safety zone. A child safety zone is an area where children commonly congregate. This includes schools, playgrounds, arcades, and other places where you might commonly find kids. You may not live within 1,000 feet of a child safety zone. So prior to your plea or sentence, if you lived within 1,000 feet of a school zone or a child safety zone, you will be required to move to a new location. While you can still go to school or attend college while on the sex offender registry, you cannot live on campus. If you're taking an extended trip or commonly travel outside of your city, you may have to register in that other city or county. Specifically, you're required to register in any city or county where you spend more than 48 consecutive hours on at least 3 occasions during any month. Failing to abide by the Texas sex offender registration requirements is a separate felony offense. The punishment ranges from a state jail felony all the way up to a first-degree felony. And the punishment is determined by the alleged violation as well as the reporting frequency that was imposed upon you at the time of the alleged violation. If you've been charged with a sexual offense in Texas, understand the consequences are far greater than whether you're going to get probation or prison time. The implications extend to potentially lifetime registration as a sex offender. If you've been charged, give us a call at 817-203-2220 or visit our website for more information.